Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Bill Michaels. Uh, I am the Chief Commercial Officer for Lavenir AI and co-founder and the moderator for this program. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership in disruptive times with two guests that are highly reputable and have led through a couple decades of change. First is Clive Heal. Clive is the CEO and co-founder of Lavenir. He has worked in different businesses and industries where he has made major changes, developed teams, and led innovation. Our second guest is Craig Reed, one of the most respected leaders in our profession. Craig is the recent winner of the J. Shipman Award from the Institute for Supply Management. Craig is the Vice President of Corporate Procurement and Chief Procurement Officer for Thermo Fisher Scientific. And Craig has led teams over the decades that have been high-performing teams. He's changed companies, industries, and made major impact on our profession. So let's get started and talk about leadership in disruptive times.
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And first of all, congratulations on the award, which I think is very well deserved. And it's great to see you joining quite a prestigious list of people over the last 20 years. What does it mean to you to win the Shipman Award?
Well, thanks, Clive, and hello, Bill, and really nice to be here with all of you today. I mean, it's actually, almost surreal for me, Clive, because in these professions, what we do is the work, right? And the work can sometimes be a little bit messy. It's always in the background, but at the end of the day, we're doing the work. And to get recognized by kind of your peers for what you've done in corporate America, but also outside of corporate America to continue to advance your profession is a real honor. And just as so grateful to have had the opportunity to receive this recognition and accolade, and also to be recognized by my peers and so many others for this prestigious award. It is truly an honor.
And it's well deserved because you've really given a lot to the profession, and we all appreciate that. I want to start with some questions. We're looking at a time unprecedented. We haven't had this much turbulence. We had a lot of turbulence. We've had, wars and the pandemic, but now we're coming to a point where we have geopolitical instability. We don't know who's going to do what's going to happen with tariffs. We have inflation, we have supply shortages, we have questions about ESG and pressure from consumers. How do we manage it in all this turbulence? Kind of interested in how what you guys are thinking.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll kick off. I think what is so interesting about today is, as you mentioned, there's kind of a sea of things that we're all basically managing through on a day-to-day basis. But if I continue to think back, like over the last series of years, even decades, we've always had some significant event that we've had to manage through, right? So you think about today's events, then you think back a few years, we had to manage through COVID. You think back a few years, we had to manage through, the great tsunamis and the depressions, and I mean, all the other significant events that have taken place over the years. And I think the one thing that has been really interesting in all of it is that, the role of the function was front and center in really helping the business achieve its overall objectives, right? If it was in COVID, depending on the company that you were in, you were really helping to provide the solutions to keep the world safe, to really drive further advancement in the work that companies needed to do to be able to provide products for end customers, but also to provide the solutions that ultimately led to us developing, vaccines that could potentially get us back to where we are today. And the function played a pivotal role in all of that. If it's in an environment where you're talking about shortages, the function spends a lot of time trying to make sure that it can develop a strategy around supply resilience, where you have the flexibility to be able to shift demand where you have the availability of supply to be able to meet their future objectives. And, kind of in today's environment, it's no different. I think what it just continues to prove is that the agility is so important in terms of how you build a resilient supply chain and a procurement supply management structure overlaid across your company to be able to deliver against overall goals. Clive, how about you?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a bit more about that, Craig, it's interesting because you talk about agility in the supply chain. I was thinking also about how do you help your people become more agile and help them adapt and adopt to the changing external environment, because it's sort of a combination of two things in a way, isn't it? Or at least two things, right?
Exactly. It is, because at the end of the day, we're fundamentally shifting our operating models to the current reality that we're working in. And the goal is how do you get everyone to come along on that overall journey? And so you're really starting to pivot very quickly on what are the things that are going to be necessary to be able to achieve, tomorrow's goals and objectives. So if you take, for example, in Thermo Fisher Scientific, the work that we're doing today in our organization, we've spent a lot of time really trying to make sure that we have very good insight into all of our data. And this is the data that cuts across our spend, data that cuts across our suppliers, data that cuts across our supply chain. And it's going down to depths within our data that we haven't necessarily had to do before, right? When you think about the current set of regulations that are coming out, you need to have information that's really talking about point of origin of your material, not just where you're buying it from, but where the material is derived from, which means you have to get a lot deeper back into your overall supply chain to understand how you can deliver on the business expectations. And so it's fundamentally driving a very different shift in focus in terms of where you're allocating resources and how you're fundamentally getting after what's going to satisfy the requirements of the business longer term.
Looking at that, Greg, looking at the data piece, what role is technology playing, and how are you dealing with the changes as we move to AI and see different capabilities in data technology and technology overall?
Yeah, data is playing a pivotal role, Bill, and I think it is allowing us to do things that we haven't had the opportunity to do before because of the way that the technology overlays on some of your largest systems and architecture, right? Because you now have the opportunity to extract data in large amounts and manipulate it and evaluate it and assess it in different ways, is really giving us flexibility and additional insights we didn't have before. And like every company and every organization, everyone's trying to understand how do you layer on kind of AI and these Gen AI tool sets to really allow us to be able to go faster and accelerate. And I look at these tools as driving a couple of different things: efficiency, effectiveness, and acceleration, right? Because I think, because there's so much going on, as you articulated before, we have to be extremely focused on being able to satisfy kind of today's requirements while we plan for the future. And you're not going to be able to get infinite resources to make that happen. So you have to get efficient as an organization. And then effectiveness really allows you to increase the rotation of work that takes place, right? And so if you can utilize the data to allow you, and the technology to allow you to get more effective, almost like saying you're going to reduce your defective parts per million, right? Which means I'm not spending a lot of time on rework. I'm actually spending more time on good information throughput through the systems. Then it allows an acceleration to get to the in-state opportunity.
Yeah, on a personal basis, I got to tell you, as a consultant, I would go in and people couldn't find any of their spend. They didn't know where their spend is. And it would take you 2-3 months to go through the general ledger and pull out all the spend. And today, probably in just a couple hours, that AI will make that an easy job, saving lots and lots of manpower. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I think one of the things that we have to do is really come up with how do we teach people to use it, and how can they best use it in accordance with whatever company rules we put in, because there's going to be rules around what AI you can use and how you have to use it, I think.
I definitely agree there, Bill. I mean, the base structure is so important, right? Because you get out what you put in,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to realize what the technology can do for you. And I think every day I'm so amazed because I'm thinking, okay, here's a problem and I'm going to solve it this way, but I don't realize that I can actually use the tools to help me develop the solution on how
Yeah.
I'm going to solve the problem, right? So we're learning on the fly in terms of how you can leverage these tools and technologies to really help us move faster. And I think, your point around how do you train the organization up to be able to leverage these tools, I think is going to be the big unlock for a lot of organizations, right? Because you have it now. How do you use it to get the most out of it, right?
Right. So I mean, you're really a leader that everybody looks up to. What kind of qualities, leadership qualities, are really that you have to use to kind of we have multiple generations, like we have 4 generations in the workforce, and every one of them learns differently and thinks differently. So how as a leader do you manage through the workforce and get them all up to speed, and how do you build them to be resilient, agile, and forward thinking?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really great question. I mean, I think what's important is that you got to be clear on the North Star, right? So this is fundamentally where we're headed, where we're going. And then I think you have to be open to the fact that there's multiple pathways to getting there. And I think, if I think back to previous years, it was like, well, here's the strategy and here's all the things that we're going to effectively do to go and deliver there. And I have a specific way that I want to go and do it. But in today's environment, there are a lot more ways to get to the end state. And you have to be open to allowing that to happen, because if not, you're going to not get the level of speed, agility in the organization needed to be able to meet overall expectations. And in today's environment, what people are looking for from a rewards scenario is very different. And
Yeah.
so I think it is a combination of making sure that as you're driving for the vision and strategy and expectations of the function and the company and the overall goals, it is also what's important to the individual, right? Because we all have intrinsic values that we live by that are important to us. And how can you leverage in the state of the strategy an opportunity to allow an individual to have that come out, and you get kind of the best of that individual coming through to allow you to achieve your overall goals, and a satisfaction for the individual that's actually having the opportunity to work on those specific items or initiatives.
Well, that's really a good answer.
Craig, with all these changes externally, have you seen all the turbulence? Have you seen a change in the way that suppliers interact with you? Have you seen that they've become more confrontational, more collaborative, more innovative? I mean, have you seen any changes in the supply chain, and because of what's happening in the marketplace?
I haven't seen a change in a reaction to what's happening in the current marketplace. What I have seen is a desire for tighter collaboration. And I think what our suppliers are looking for, just like what we're looking for, is, how can we all be successful together, right? And it's really trying to figure out what that unlock is in the value chain for the end customer. And I think for the most part, trying to get more insight and more information and more transparency on kind of what's important for you, so that I can define what that means for me, so that we can define what that means as we try and deliver on the end state goal that we all have. I would say in pockets right now, because of how we're fundamentally working, the expectations in many cases are starting to shift, right? Because the requirements are shifting. And so I think what is important is that there is probably a nervousness in the supply base in terms of trying to understand, well, what are the implications of that? And so for us, it's just really around how do we make sure we can communicate, be as transparent as possible, and make sure that we're driving strategies that allow us to be able to meet today's requirements, while we're also making sure that we're looking to satisfy the future. And I think, one thing, Clive, that is coming out of this too is a different level of creativity in terms of how we think about value delivery, right? There isn't just, one way to deliver value, right? And value can come in multiple forms. And I think, being able to start to open up the aperture to be able to look at it that way becomes even more important.
So when I hear you say that, Craig, it makes me think that management's old idea of suppliers are there for incremental profit, find more money from the suppliers is waning away as we start to look at what are the value achieved that we can get. I mean, that's important because some organizations are still at the suppliers are additional source of profit, and they haven't really moved to the value piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that we think about it is that suppliers are part of your value chain. And so at the end of the day, 1+1 should equal 3. And so if you're driving an opportunity where you're able to truly look at value holistically, there are opportunities that if we fundamentally have the chance to go together, that it should create significant incremental impact. And I think, the metric is kind of depending on what you're measuring to and where you're stopping, right? And, typically if we just talk about pure PPV, you're going to get one level of intensity and one level of focus.
Yep.
But if you talked about, how do you, delay revenue at risk, or how do you look to drive margin expansion, or even you're fundamentally opening up the aperture for how you think about value delivery and the role that your supply base and your suppliers can play in that overall process.
Yeah.
Craig, you talked about creativity, you talked about analytical skills. What else do you see now as becoming important for your team members to be successful?
I actually think there's a level of communication and collaboration and being what I would characterize as a full suite business leader that's becoming even more important, right? No longer can you just stay in your lane of, I'm a procurement professional and my requirement is to do X. Because in order for you to do X, you have to basically work through so many others in the organization to achieve it. So communication, influencing skills, these soft skills are so important to allow you to be able to achieve the end state goal. And I think for many teams, there's the impression that, we all make database decisions, right? But we work with people. And so at the end of the day, you have to be able to work with people first to even get them to open up to the fact that you're talking about data is basically making a recommendation that we do X. And so those soft skills are so important from a development standpoint to allow you to be able to really advance your agenda and advance, some of these key strategic opportunities that are important for the organization going forward. And so I just kind of liken it to, we really have to start thinking like these very strategic business leaders, because that's fundamentally what we're looking to do. How do we enable the business to deliver success for our end customers?
Well, that's
So it seems to me, sorry, Bill, it seems to me that with all the turbulence that people are dealing with, which should make them better because they have to learn how to deal with these issues, right? And what you're talking about here in terms of being really more strategic, rounded business managers, it seems to me then that procurement, the career paths for procurement people could potentially open up quite a bit into other areas of the business now, because the skills they've built, the knowledge that they've got, the level they're going to have to operate in to be successful. It sounds like that actually could be really good for procurement people if they want to move out into other areas of the business, right?
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think if you look at the role of a procurement professional as a commercial leader in the company, I mean, they're fundamentally driving tenets of finance, marketing, engineering, R&D, cost management. I mean, when you take a look at the roles that these individuals play in companies in terms of the initiatives and the things that they're driving across a large swath of things that are very important to drive success in the business. And I think as the function continues to evolve, and we continue to open the aperture up around how we define value and how we work together with our key stakeholders to deliver the value promise, I think it opens the opportunity for individuals to be considered very differently in terms of what's your future career path in the organization. Standing at the head of a function, leading a business, leading another major area in the organization. And I think we're starting to see that if you take a look at other leaders today at other companies in terms of what other roles they're starting to have responsibility for, in addition to what I would characterize as pure supply chain, supply management, or procurement.
So we're getting close to the end of our time because we said we keep this short. One last question is what should you and other procurement leaders be doing now to kind of future-proof the organization? What investments or capabilities will differentiate the top performers from the average performers?
Yeah, I mean, Bill, is so interesting because the world is changing so quickly right now. I think those that have fundamentally embraced the use of technology to really allow them to drive efficiency and effectiveness and acceleration in the right way, not just for the purposes of reducing the functional cost, but for the purposes of increasing the functional impact, you will truly drive significant incremental value into your companies, right? Because what you want to do is ensure that you're getting the highest return for every dollar spent in the organization, which is the same as getting the highest return for every hour spent working in the organization, right? And if you can leverage these tools in a way that it allows you to spend more time getting after the things that drive the highest value, then I think we ultimately have an opportunity to really drive kind of the next level of innovation that should take place with our partners, right? If you take a look at how much time teams spend doing what I would call transactional, I don't like to use the word tactical, but more transactional activity, because all activity is important, right? If you were, all activity, all roles are important, but they all have different returns based on how individuals are working on it. But if you can get them out of most of the transactional activity, you get them out of more of the firefighting activity and more into the longer term strategic activity, really partner with the business. I mean, I think there's an inflection point there that delivers incrementally more for the organization. And I think that's what's going to be important.
Yep, and I think you're right. When you start looking at what's going to happen is, there's no doubt in my mind that the transactional piece of procurement will go away. So people really have to be upskilling themselves to be more into the strategic mindset, or they're not going to be around in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, just as you think about what's happening in universities, and as we have a chance to influence the next generation, Bill, I know you and Clive, and we all have an opportunity through ISM and through other mediums and organizations to continue the next generation, then continue to influence these tools. I mean, we're fundamentally building business leaders, right, that will have the opportunity to do great things in the organization. And as we continue to advance and as we continue to see, I mean, there's this function's impact and its breadth in an organization is pretty extensive. And so if
pretty exciting, you got to say, right?
Yeah. And if you have the opportunity to harness it the right way, I mean, it can be extremely powerful in terms of allowing you to achieve your in-state goal. So to your point, really exciting, exciting.
So I'm going to have you guys wrap up and well, kind of sum up what we've talked about, or what your thinking is as we move forward.
Craig,
you're the guest.
Your session. You're the guest.
No, but again, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the opportunity. I'm passionate about supply management, supply chain, the procurement function, and really excited about where we're going as a profession, right? And I think truly, if we really embrace our role in business as business leaders responsible for a function as opposed to a function trying to drive into the business, will fundamentally deliver much bigger impact to our organizations. And, you know, you can't start the way, you have to start where the organization is and move there. And I think, you know, that's what's important for all of us as we continue on this journey.
Clive?
We were at the crest of a really exciting new horizon, I think, with all the tech coming in, the opportunities for us, and in a way, the external turbulence actually helps us. It makes us stronger. It really gives us an opportunity to deliver value and help the business and drive our businesses forward. So it's never been so exciting to be in procurement as now. Absolutely.
And my takeaway is, you know, when I first came into business, everything was, we had a 5-year plan. We'll execute it 1 year at a time. And we're lucky if we have a week-long plan or a month-long plan because of changes. I mean, even yesterday, they couldn't agree with China. So now the tariffs are back up and then they've been back down. So we have to really be on our toes. We have to really prepare people to be flexible and very, very resilient. And we have to change our supply chains to do the same thing. So that's my takeaway from this. Craig, thank you for being our guest today. Procurement leaders are really navigating an unprecedented landscape, and we really learned a lot from you today. Thank you.
Craig, thanks for joining, and congratulations again on the Shipman Award. Very well deserved. Thanks for your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right.
Craig.
Bye-bye.